So why do we need a methodology research unit? Why do methods matter? It would be too easy to sideline methods or to imagine that research methods exist outside of a body or a program of health research. But as this trials commentary explained, methods should really be at the centre of our science. And UK funders such as NIHR also believe this. NIHR have recently announced funding for 8 national research support services, which will replace their existing network of local research design services. And our unit will be a partner in one of those RSSs, which will see £8.7 million of funding coming to these 4 institutions. That's 1.7 million coming to us as well. The driver for that from NIHR's perspective is, as they say on their press release online, to increase the use of innovative research designs. We don't yet know what the name of our RSS will be, but NIHR have announced that they want the RSSs to be named after constellations. So watch this space. I'm going to introduce, in a moment, we're going to hear from Claire Robinson, who's our Senior Lecturer in Medical Statistics, about quantitative research methods. But to start with, I want to introduce to you Jill Russell, who is the Research Design Service London Qualitative Methods Lead and will be one of the joint leads of the new RSS from October.
Thanks, Richard. As a research design service advisor, it seems that wherever one looks these days, whether it's NIHR guidance or MRC guidance on evaluation of complex interventions, researchers are being encouraged to embrace mixed methodologies. But the striking disconnect for me is that the number of proposals that come to us at RDS where the study design is purely a trial. And a frequent piece of feedback that I find myself giving to applicants is, have you considered the value of including some qualitative research in your study? So, I mean, having said that, it was great to hear that the IBD Boost trial started with some qualitative focus group work. Anyway, I've just got 7 minutes to tell you what I see as the added value that qualitative research can bring to trials. I think in a nutshell, I'd say that it enables a wider range of questions to be addressed. So it goes beyond looking at whether an intervention is effective or not, and addresses the complexity of the why and the how of effectiveness. So how does it do this? I've identified 3 key components of qualitative research's added value, and I'm just going to talk very quickly through those. First of all, it brings the experiential aspects of participating in a trial to the surface. It asks, what does it mean for participants to be part of a trial? What are their subjective experiences? And this can include exploring not just participants' experiences, but also health professionals and researchers' experiences too. So I think qualitative research has the potential to foreground the agency of all stakeholders in a trial. It also means that if it's conducted as part of a pilot or feasibility study, or as the first stage of a trial, the findings can improve the conduct of that trial by exploring questions about acceptability and feasibility. And not only the acceptability and feasibility of the trial, but also of the intervention being tested. And the tandem study of a tailored intervention for anxiety and depression management conducted by colleagues here at QM is a good example, I think, of how qualitative research helped with understanding the real life challenges for patients and professionals in the implementation of the intervention. And in this paper here, the researchers describe the various refinements that they made to the intervention on the basis of the qualitative research. Secondly, qualitative research can provide a rich picture of the context within which a trial takes place. It exposes the complexities, the complexity of the ways in which, for example, organizational factors and policy pressures interact with an intervention. In a mixed methods study I was involved with, the CEM study, of an e-learning intervention for managers to improve employee well-being and reduce sickness absence, the qualitative research highlighted the unsupportive organizational context within which managers felt they were working, and also the intertwined nature of personal and workplace stress and the wider context of home and family life beyond the boundaries of the trial. I should also add here that what I haven't got time to do is talk about the range of qualitative methodologies. But both this and the tandem paper, I think, are good starting points for describing the appropriateness of different methods, be that interviews, focus groups, ethnographic observation, case study research, and so on. The third value added of qualitative work that I've identified here is its attention to theory. Qualitative research can tease out the assumptions on which an intervention and its trial is based, and thus help develop, refine, and challenge the trial's theory of change. It can also bring established organizational, psychological, and sociological theories to enrich the analysis of both qualitative and quantitative findings. Again, the tandem study provides a good example of the use of theory in developing both the intervention and its trial. And I've listed a few of the commonly used theories here in mixed methods research: theoretical domains framework, normalization process theory, and the diffusion of innovation theory. Okay, so that's all on the plus side. But I think it would be naive not to acknowledge the significant problems of using qualitative research with trials. Undoubtedly, qualitative research complicates matters for those undertaking a trial. One line of argument is that a trial design is necessarily and inevitably about simplifying the social world so that it can be studied through identifying and measuring variables and exploring the statistical relationships between them. But qualitative research, on the other hand, is about exploring the complexity of social life and based on an interpretivist paradigm that rejects the idea that the world can be reduced to and represented by abstracted variables, what is known as the positivist paradigm. So we need to be aware that within mixed methods research, there are always likely to be tensions between acknowledging complexity on the one hand and simplification of the social world on the other. And leading on and related to this tension, one of the key challenges for those using mixed methods is how to meaningfully integrate quantitative and qualitative data so that the two components become more than the sum of the parts. And I'm out of time to go into any detail on this, but I will just mention again the GEM study I was involved with on workplace stress, in which we explore in quite a lot of detail what the concept of integration meant in practice. And also I've put up this paper here by David Richards and colleagues, which gives some good work through detailed examples of data integration with some different, with 3 or 4 different studies. And my final slide, where I've just put a couple of other useful references. Alicia Kathleen has published a lot of work in this area, and I recommend her work for anybody interested in looking at how to maximise the value of combining qualitative research and RCTs in health research. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about some of the quantitative research methods and where our strengths lie, and then just talk about opportunities for funding some of these methods. So the MRU brings together people with interests and expertise in a number of different methodological areas and acts as a focus for those research activities. It's a multidisciplinary team. It consists of statisticians, health economists, health researchers, research fellows, and PhD students. And this diagram just gives you a flavour of all the different research interests that people in the MRU have. I'll touch upon a few of these in my talk and who's involved, but I really wanted to focus on where we have particular strength, and this is pilot and feasibility studies, cluster randomised trials, and stepped wedge designs. So there are several members of the MRU working in pilot and feasibility studies. So Claire Chan was involved in the development of the conceptual framework. So this was a large piece of research that was trying to clarify the terminology around pilot and feasibility studies amongst the research community, and this used the Delphi consensus. And this is the diagram from that paper, and they define a feasibility study to ask a question about, can something be done, how should we proceed, or whether we should proceed, and if so, how. And then pilot studies are kind of a subset of those feasibility studies that share some design features of the main trial. Claire was also involved in the consult extension for reporting pilot trials. We also have Saskia Eddy, who's final year PhD student, and she's looking at sample size justification, and she's currently conducting a Delphi study also to bring consensus around how those are justified. The 3 of us are members of the pilot and feasibility working group, aiming to kind of continue that methodological development in this area. And Claire also sits on the editorial team of the pilot and feasibility studies journal. And just to draw your attention to the bottom, we have a pilot and feasibility studies website that provides lots of resources and just helpful information in people who are interested in these designs. So cluster randomised trials, so you're probably familiar with a cluster randomised trial, but this is where rather than randomising individuals, we're randomising groups of people. So these have unique features in terms of the recruitment, the randomisation and consent procedures, but also this randomisation by cluster introduces kind of non-independence of outcomes among people in those groups. So that needs to be taken into account in the design and the analysis of these studies. So in collaboration with the PCTU, members of the MRU have extensive experience designing and conducting cluster randomised trials. We also hold an annual conference on current developments in cluster randomised trials and step-to-edge designs, and that's currently in its 9th year, and that will be taking place in November of this year. We also have a short course, a practical guide to cluster randomised trials and step-to-edge designs. This is based on the book by Eldridge and Kerry, but is updated as the methodology develops, and also contains a lot more information about step-to-edge designs. And again, I'll point you to another website that we have for cluster randomised trials and step-to-edge designs. And again, this is a great resource for publications, and also has previous programmes to the conference if you're interested to see what's been presented previously. So just to highlight some of the work that we've done in cluster randomised trials around sample size calculations. So this top one was a systematic review that I conducted around sample size calculations for cluster randomised trials, and I think that offers quite a comprehensive kind of resource for anyone looking to design these trials. I also conducted a review of the methodological quality and reporting of sample size calculations in papers, and that highlighted that even with the consort extension, actually the reporting of the required elements to replicate sample size still needs to be improved. And at the bottom here is a paper that Richard was involved in. So this is looking at optimal design of cluster randomised trials when you have unequal allocation of clusters across your 2 treatment arms, but also allowing for the cluster size to differ between those 2 treatment arms. So step-to-edge designs. So this diagram here is a representation of a step-to-edge design. So these are also often cluster randomised. So in this diagram, the clusters are hospitals, and at the beginning of the study, all the clusters start in the control condition, and then at some point in the trial cross over to the intervention, and then remain in that intervention arm for the duration of the trial. And they would be randomly allocated to follow one of those sequences. So Richard has done a lot of work in step-to-edge designs. They've become increasingly popular, and I think the methodology is still catching up with their popularity. None of my icons have come up, but these first 2 papers are tutorial papers, so kind of a very nice kind of overview of step-to-edge designs, and helps you to think through the different practicalities and issues that you might consider in deciding whether that is a design for you. These middle 2 papers look at sample size calculations, and this second one develops a very practical kind of sample size calculator that makes it easier for people to implement some of those procedures. And then this final one is an extension of the consort statement, again for step-to-edge designs. So switching our attention to different funding methods available for methodology research. So this is the MRC NIHR Better Methods, Better Research funding stream. So they will fund development of methods that are generalisable. So they don't want to see something that's only specific to a particular scenario. They want something that is generalisable to many trials and has lots of applications. It's an ongoing initiative with 2 rounds a year, but it is quite competitive, only 4 to 6 funded from a potential 20 to 40 applications. And they sometimes also offer these strategic opportunities where they've identified a need for more methodological research. So we've also been very successful in attracting PhD students to undertake methodological research. We have a new student, Wonyin, starting in a couple of weeks, funded by the TMRP, and she'll be looking at statistical methods for economic evaluation alongside step-to-wedge cluster randomised trials. And we have 2 current PhD students from the Health Data in Practice programme, and that is Charis and Leti. And Charis is looking at routine healthcare data, and Leti is looking at the analysis of adverse event outcomes. Fellowships is also another way that we can fund methodological research. So Akshay Patel has recently finished his pre-doctoral fellowship, looking at methodological problems faced by statisticians in surgical and perioperative clinical trials. And we have Nadine, who's currently undertaking a doctoral fellowship looking at statistical methodology in individual participant data meta-analysis. And another opportunity for funding, so the NIHR are encouraging people to include methodology funding within their applications to the following funding streams. So that's a maximum of 30,000, and they are encouraging kind of an increase to kind of the source data for decision making. So they encourage people to look at alternative ways of undertaking a study, so to do with recruitment or retention or data collection. And again, the idea behind that is that it's generalizable to many trials, although it could be beneficial to the host trial. I feel like I've whizzed through that, but that concludes my talk, and I will just leave you with the flyer for our cluster randomised conference.